Welcome now to our conversation, Mr. Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mr. Taleblu, thank you very much for joining us. A pleasure as per usual. So the greater the chance, the greater the threat, rather, the greater the chance. What do you make of Trump's, dropping the diplomatic bomb, if you will, when it comes to talking with Iran?
Well, great to be with you. Listen, it should be no surprise at this point in time, Donald Trump, who has been critical of the Obama-era 2015 deal, which he left in 2018, has also at the same time, even if we go back in history, prior to when he even entered office in the first round, during the campaign period, 2015-2016, has talked about diplomacy and tried to get a better deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think it's imperative to let the president try. But, my criticism here is that it's too soon. President Biden had 4 years to undo President Trump's 14 to 16 months, depending on how you count, of maximum economic pressure against the Iranians. And I think to be so interested in a negotiation so soon actually plays into the Iranians' hands, because Iran is trying to initiate some kind of diplomatic arrangement where it doesn't have to pay the price for engaging with Trump, but it tries to run the clock on things like snapback, which expires in October 2025, all the meanwhile trying to blunt the potential for an Israeli or an American military operation against the regime's still fast advancing nuclear program.
So, Mr. Ben Taleblu, let's exercise our imagination muscles for a second here. Saturday night, the teams are sitting down in Oman asking for tea or coffee or whatever, and then what? What is the first talking point? Simply put, could anything prevent Iran from going nuclear if it wants to? What's the reference? The old regime, the old deal, fresh start? How is it going to go?
Well, we certainly know the Iranian play here. The Iranian play is going to be trying to use the fatally flawed 2015 deal to probably come up with some kind of a new framework that, again, ropes-a-dopes the administration, doesn't solve the Iranian nuclear issue, and then kicks the can down the road. And also, past this prologue here, totally expect the Iranians to come with a list of grievances, expect them to come to the table with, diplomats who know the nuclear issue fully, and to try to basically ensnare America into a process that ultimately ends up benefiting the Iranians. How the Americans come to the table here is going to be quite key. It is unclear right now if the statement offered by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz about needing to seek dismantlement, a position that Prime Minister Netanyahu has, a position that, my think tank has, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or if there's going to be a preference for some kind of lesser deal. And if that preference for a lesser deal is sussed out from the Iranians by the Americans very early, then the process will lead to a bad deal.
Mr. Dan Perry here in the studio, perhaps you can chime in too. Let's try to imagine the first couple of sentences exchanged in Oman this coming Saturday.
Well, a lot depends on what the attitude of the Americans really is. I agree with the previous speaker. If they allow themselves to be ensnared into an interminable process, like from the bazaar in Isfahan, lasting years and years, and enabling Iran to buy time until the snapback, until they further enrich, and so forth and so on. That, I think, would be unfortunate, would be opposed by Israel, and would suggest that Trump is as big a sucker as all the presidents who preceded. I would far, far rather see something more approaching an ultimatum, where they take seriously their own 2-month window that's been discussed and tell Iran that they're here not to discuss all of Iran's grievances, but rather, in effect, the terms of surrender. And only thus will their regime survive. Because if they end up being attacked and having their nuclear facilities in Natanz, in Fordow, in Arak, the heavy water plant, and elsewhere obliterated, that will probably weaken the regime to the point of encouraging a revolution. Now, I think the world would benefit from Iran understanding that the paradigm of interminable negotiations, where they approach on equal footing because of what the global principle of sovereignty, is over with. And are dealing with a president who, on one side, may be impetuous and do radical, reckless things. On the other side, is determined to pursue a goal that the world has been pursuing for 30 years. For 30 years, while Iran spins them all over the table like a dreidel.
Well, I do want to ask about the fact Witkoff was dubbed to be the one to lead these talks in a second. But circling back to the Oval for a second, Mr. Ben Taleblu, a whole lot was said at this, pre-gaming, essentially, gathering at the Oval before the proper meeting between Trump and Netanyahu. Among the headlines that perhaps were somewhat did not draw enough attention was Trump saying the campaign against the Houthis is very successful. What does he mean here? Are we talking about deterring them, foiling the will, or harming their ability to cause harm?
It's likely a reference to their ability to cause harm. For example, there's been reports that the U.S. has moved on from not just targeting things, but targeting people with respect to their campaign against the Houthis in Yemen, and also the show of military force against the Houthis, which are literally armed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. For example, the Houthis are the only proxy of Iran with medium-range ballistic missiles. They're the only entity in history to actually live-fire anti-ship ballistic missiles at targets. So, despite being a non-state actor, they punch well above the weight of many states, and that's thanks to their ties to Tehran. So by flexing against the Houthis, the administration could be trying to signal to Tehran how credible that military option actually is.
Would you agree that what needs to be on the table here in Oman and beyond is not just a nuclear program, but Iran's entire chaos project, including the proxies in Lebanon, in West Bank and Gaza, in Yemen, and in Iraq, and also the long-range missile program and everything? In short, in order for the West to continue tolerating the regime that oppresses its own people and is hated by them, to not take more concrete action in the direction of regime change, to win that concession from the states, they need to end everything, and they need to end it immediately. Would that be overreach? Do you think it would be impossible to coerce them in this way? Or would it in fact be wise and shock them into a different paradigm than the one we've seen for decades?
Okay, so there's a few things there. That which I think should happen, is the president should actually push away from the table. The president should actually not be seeking to engage. The president needs to run the clock on maximum pressure. And if the Iranians decide to respond militarily against us or against the Israelis, then the Iranians have to be hit back hard. And if the Iranians continue to absorb maximum pressure, then that pressure needs to be doubled, tripled, quadrupled over time. That needs to be the strategy. In the absence of that strategy, and given the president's stated desire for a deal and stated desire for diplomacy, I think the president needs to focus on the nuclear issue. The reason I say the nuclear issue, this includes, in my view, the ballistic missiles and the other delivery vehicles, because most, if not all, of this arsenal could be used to deliver a nuclear weapon, like land attack cruise missiles, like other long-range strike platforms. The reason I say nuclear is because the Islamic Republic, many thanks to Israel, of course, is a loser now in many of the jurisdictions that it once had proxies. And so 2025 is not 2015. If you bring Iran to the table to talk about Syria, to talk about Yemen, to talk about Iraq, you risk locking in their waning assets. Israel has just proved to the world that there is a military option against the military threats Tehran has arrayed over the past few decades against us and against our partners in the region. So now we actually have a credible military option that the U.S. is exercising as we speak against the Iranian axis. So no negotiations over the axis. The axis has to be dismantled, period, and the military tool is going to be the primary tool with which to do that.
But
if the Islamic Republic wants to fight to live another day, then it's going to have to dismantle its nuclear program.
Why not demand of Iran that it cease all weapons shipments to the Houthis? That would help eliminate them militarily.
Would you trust the Iranians, though? That's the point. I'm happy to get that on paper, but I'm willing to tell you as an analyst of Iranian behavior that paper is not going to be worth much
I would trust the blockade of the port of Aden.
What you want from the Iranians, there are already multiple maritime task forces in the Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, Indian Ocean, Gulf of Aden, Bab el-Mandeb, and Red Sea, and still weapons are coming in. So what needs to be done is tighten everything that exists there on the supply side. If the Iranians give you a promissory note that they won't ship missiles or weapons or anything else, great, but use that note against them the first time you actually detect any sort of thing. But, getting this note from the Iranians does not earn them sanctions relief, because the days of them trying to disconnect the dots between themselves and their proxies are over.
Senior Fellow, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Mr. Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you very much for your time, sir. Pleasure, as always. Thank you.